Hello there, my children. This is my world history group. I'm going to come to you live today on St. Patrick's Day. This is your favorite leprechaun, Colonel Gallagher. And I'm going to kind of give you a very short, brief introduction to World War One. I'm going to really try to keep it low, so I'm going to give you less, not more. If you need more, you need to ask questions and email me. But this is the first installment. I will get back to you specifically relating to your essay by Stossinger. The first thing is when you look at World War One, the causes are really immense. The first thing I would make note of is something called imperialism, and we mentioned this. In fact, your document day material is due March 23rd relating to imperialism. So it's not that imperialism is irrelevant; it is a continuation as you move into World War One. For example, conflict between the Germans and the Russians really can relate back to the Balkan region, which is where Southeast Europe is at. This is where Serbia would be. This is ground zero, right? The assassination. We'll get to this in a little bit. But the idea that the Russians, the Ottoman Turks, and the Germans are related to that region right there. The Ottomans, the Turkish area, the Ottomans trying to hold on to that region of Southeast Europe. Meanwhile, you have a place called Serbia that did fight and did eventually get its liberation from the Ottoman Turks, and now Serbia is an independent place. They are Slavic, Slavic, defended and related to the Russians. So this is nationalism now. Meanwhile, the Austrians, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, remember the dual monarchy, the Austria-Hungarian Empire, also has a stake in that region, this place called Bosnia, that the Austrians pridefully control. And they actually made an agreement, the Austrians made an agreement with the Russians in 1908 to annex Bosnia, make it part of theirs, annex, A-N-N-E-X, to make it part of theirs. And this agreement in 1908 then is the Austrians now controlling Bosnia, that the Serbians find absolutely objectionable. They don't like it. And now this vortex that's going to kind of suck in the Russians into this region and create an animosity between the Serbians, an anger between the Serbians and the Austrians. And this is linking the Germans because of the German-Austrian link. So you have a German-Austrian link because of the Austrians controlling Bosnia. You have a Russian connection to the Serbians who want the Bosnian region, which is their fellow Slavics, but it's really about the Bosnian ports to that side. In the middle of all this, the Turkish, the Ottoman Turks. And the reason that becomes important is when you look at a map, and I don't know how to put a map up here, but you look at a map, it's because the Russians have the strategic importance of the Balkan-Dardanelles, this little strait that the Russians use to bring in about 90% of their grain, okay, which goes right through where the Ottomans control. So this region right there is ground zero for what we're talking about World War One. The other link to this is the idea of industry, industrialization, industrial revolution. The Germans under Wilhelm, the Kaiser, has undergone a process of building these massive amounts of submarines. Wilhelm wants to be like England. He's got the idea of finding his place in the sun, as we call it. Remember the British, the sun doesn't set on the British Empire. Here we go, imperialism. Now we got militarism and industrialization. And the Germans, once they go on building this navy, mainly the submarines, which are intended to be a force to reckon with and reckon against the British, to sink British ships. And this is probably the biggest mistake of the 20th century, is the Germans manufacturing these weapons of war, which is now creating a problem with the British. And now you have all the cocktail in place. You have the anger of the French towards the Germans. Remember the Franco-Prussian War, Alsace-Lorraine, this region. You have the Russians with their interest in the Balkan regions and the control of those straits, okay, where the Turkish are at. What this does is create these alliances in Europe, okay, where on one side you have the British, the French, and the Russians, who make a single alliance called the Triple Entente, Entente. I got to spell it right. I don't have it in front of me. If you need, I'll email it to you. That's one alliance, is the English, the French, and the Russians, formulated around the fear of Germany. And then in the alliance to the other side, you have the Central Powers, okay, the Germans, the Austrians, and now the Ottomans are going to align themselves with the Germans and the Austrians because of the fear of what's going on with the Russians, who want to control that strait. And of course, the Ottomans' fear of the Austrians, and the ground zero comes right back to Bosnia, where, like I said earlier in class, I mentioned in passing, the assassination of Ferdinand now is the match that's going to light that massive powder keg. The idea of militarism, industrialization, the nationalism between the Slavics, the Russians, and the Serbians, and the nationalism between the Germans and the Austrians. Okay, that's a national link. And now you have the other element that's been added to it, which is this nationalism that the Serbians, they have this desire of Bosnia, and this massive military buildup. Now, why that matters, keep in mind, as you're reading Stossinger, you're going to see the word mobilization. The Russians are now in this sense of mobilization. The Germans are in this sense of mobilization. It has to come back to this thing called the railroad, because you want to get your soldiers as fast as you can to those fronts. And the railroad is this modern transportation network, industrialized. The Russians are proudly building these things. The Germans are building these things. And the one thing that's a link to this, believe it or not, the media, the newspapers, you can read it. You can see what the Russians are doing. They're proudly pronouncing this. And just like the Germans, and this military industrial design of World War I is promoting this sense of fear, and so this is helping to create this atmosphere. The greatest irony to me, and we'll get to this later on, is here's Germany, Berlin, which was ground zero also for this incredible design of science and technology, literature. The German words Mach, M-A-C-H, comes out of this period of time. The Hertz, H-E-R-T-Z, okay, which we still use today. This is amazing. Berlin was the Athens, the modern Athens of its day. And yet, because regardless of all this science and technology and this knowledge, it's going to be swept away by this war fever. In other words, why this links to what I gave you with Stossinger is the question of the inevitability of war. And Stossinger takes a look at it and is very critical and says, men made decisions. It comes back to leadership in this moment of crisis. And here we are, moment of crisis. And so we'll look at World War I, okay? But this is the first installment. Hang loose. I'll give you some more slowly. And if you need help, please email me. All right? But don't forget what's due. March 23rd. Email me the document days, hopefully if you can in groups, and then I'll assess them and get them back to you as soon as possible. I hope everyone's safe. I hope everyone's healthy, and remember social distancing, do your part, but don't forget those that are elderly, and don't forget those that might need your assistance, okay? But do your part. Miss you guys, and I'll see you. I look forward to seeing you at some point. Thank you. Bye.